This is how we roll. Hey, this is how we roll. Hey, we're live. Fuck it, we're live. Dale, Jake, and JV running the box. So this week we're gonna do current events, and we'll do some cleanup too, some other things. And current events includes a topic we've we barely touched on, but we talked a lot about it. Was remember when we talked about AI?
Yeah,
and there's a lot to be said there, and I see more and more stuff hitting, and I just had somebody hit me up in messages about AI, about something that happened. It's real. And I've written a bunch about it. So that subject is an endless vein of discussion. And then, of course, the former president, Joe Biden, is announced. There was, in the U.S., big announcement, kind of a couple big ones. First, Jake Tapper of CNN has a book out, and it's all about how we were lied to by the media, said the media guy, about President Biden's decline. And that's all sort of making the news now. It seems to be, that's the latest conspiracy noticing that's breaking through, is that Biden really, did you know, Jake, that Biden actually wasn't sharp as a tack? Did you realize that?
There were some subtle signs. You had to be really perceptive to pick up on it. I am surprised that the mainstream media missed it. Because they too are about as sharp as a 2x4.
Yeah.
The
Jake Tapper tell-all book. It's amazing. I mean, it's an amazing. So I had to tweet about it. So if anybody wants to know my tweet on the Jake Tapper book, what they're like, because it sounds kind of crazy. Like the Babylon Bee had a great headline there. I have to pull it up, but it's like, I look it up. It's like Jake Tapper investigates Jake Tapper. Jake Tapper uncovers startling evidence that Biden's decline was covered up by Jake Tapper. So that was the Babylon Bee headline, which was perfectly. So Jake Tapper, for those who don't follow and don't give a shit, was a CNN anchor, and beclowned himself repeatedly. He was the Biden sharp as a tack guy when Biden looked like he was shitting his pants on stage at one point. And so Tapper was out there publicly, like, offering his opinion. Yeah, there it is. I love that video. The Chiron is great. Yeah, so thank you, JV. And so Tapper was a complete shill, part of the American Pravda, while Biden was shuffling around, walking into the woods down in the Amazon there, no idea what he's doing. And now Tapper's got a book out, which is this sort of, he's gonna do an investigative report to tell us all that Biden wasn't quite as sharp as we thought, evidently. Right. Like, it's an amazing thing. So you have to ask yourself, like, what the fuck? This is like Baghdad Bob coming out after the invasion of Iraq with a book about how Saddam's defenses weren't everything, the Iraqi military wasn't everything it was cracked up to be. You know what I mean? Like, bro, you were the guy out there standing that there was going to be yelling that there was going to be a trail of American bodies and all this. Like, you were the guy. I mean, that, so people, like, you kind of have to ask, how can they be trusted now? Oh, that's the whole point. I mean, all of it is like this weird, Michelle, thank you. Yes, it's this weird, like, meta thing. So I want to offer to people.
Well, I think this is like, I believe it was Mark Andreessen who said this on one of his podcasts. I'm sorry if it wasn't him, but he basically said the Democrats are not a wing of the media.
Yeah,
it's the other way around.
Yeah,
it's not. The media is controlling the Democrats.
Yeah.
And that kind of put a light on for me. I was like, oh, I've been looking at it through
all the wrong.
I've been thinking it was going the other direction.
Yes.
I was wrong.
Yes. And that is, it used to be the joke was that the thought by Republicans was in the 90s with the Clinton and media. I mean, CNN was called the Clinton News Network even back in the 90s.
Right.
But so Michelle, yeah, absolutely. Why would you trust them now, right? There's this weird aspect to all of this. Like, but I want to give you a reframing to think about this. And I tweeted this because it hit me, and I was like, oh my God, why would Jake Tapper write a book like this? Like, why would you even resurface your own thing, right? It sounds insane, right? and I'm going to give you a frame for this because your answer, before you answer, I want you to hear. Here's why I think Jake Tapper wrote this. For the exact same reasons that OJ wrote If I Did It.
Right.
And I want everybody to just sit with that for a little bit because it's more than one reason. So why do you think OJ came out and wrote a book that said after his trial, when he was acquitted of the murder of his wife and of Nicole Brown Simpson and potentially her lover, maybe just a friend, Ron Goldman. Right. So after OJ, after all of that, he gets off and then he writes a book, If I Did It. And just ask yourself, why on God's green earth would anyone, in that circumstance? It seems insane. And I would just say to you, it's that Jake Tapper's Biden's not as fit, behind the curtain, Biden's not as fit as we think, is written for the exact same reasons that made OJ write his book. All of them, by the way. And then you can just fill in the blank with how many you can think of. Because I can think of a bunch. And they're all identical to both.
Right. I think this is one of the things that I see is that in the world of evil, the way that they moralize themselves is that they have a rule that you have to tell people what you're going to do or what you've done. And that absolves you of it. That if you have a sign that says these apples are poisoned and you buy the apples, well, that's not my fault for selling you the apples. That's your fault for buying them. Now, the sign that the apples are poisoned may be really small, not very
right.
And there's a big billboard like fresh apples, just got them in, really, really selling you the apples. But as long as some point, as they whisper to you, hey, the apples are poisoned. Anything that happens after that is your karma or poor decision, not their fault. They don't have to pay for that. Yeah. So that's one of the ways that lands on me.
Yeah, well, it's funny. You and I have that same reaction, which is my visceral one, is exactly that. Is it almost feels like that required disclosure that evil has to kind of, but I have that same kind of thing. The other part of it is I can think of a ton of psychological reasons and that you can mine Freud or Jungian archetypes or whatever you want, whatever your thoughts are on psychology. There's probably some model that has a name for when somebody does something so clearly, is so obviously involved in the wrongdoing, and then sort of
but has always himself.
Yeah, but has always all along, sort of
Bob's your uncle, I'm innocent.
Right. There's a reality, and I say this as a criminal defense attorney too, having run up against this many, many, many times as an attorney, which is one of the more interesting aspects of it is most of your clients are guilty as fuck. And so, and a big chunk of your time, I struggle with this. I don't know if I told you this story before, but for a while it was bumming me out because my clients would come in, I'd look at the evidence. I'd usually get the evidence before I met my clients. Not always, but a lot of times. That's the way it works in the military. So the investigation's already done and the guy has already been, charges are preferred, and then it comes over. Now he's going to get a defense attorney. Hey, it's me. And you get the guy's file. And so before you ever can even schedule an appointment, you've had a chance to look through, read everything, presumably, if you're not a turd. And, I'm reading the investigation, and depending on what's in there, I mean, there might be like, hey, we've got a video of your guy committing the crime, or whatever, right? So before you've ever seen him, in some sense, he's got the advantage of you. He was there, obviously, but you've got the advantage. You're looking at the government's case before he walks in. And so, I can't tell you how many times the guy comes in and how I'm listening to him tell me all about how he's like, wasn't there, I had nothing to do with it. I'm like, my man, I got screen caps of you in the, I've got Colonel Mustard in the library with the fucking lead pipe. Like it's right here. They can picture you, standing over,
right.
I'm like, I don't know. And listening to them lie and lie. And
well,
lie.
This is one of those things where I've had conversations, not as a defense attorney, but just in real life and business dealings where it's like, hey, that's a great story to tell your friends so that you don't look like the scumbag that you are. I was actually there. I recall the events. The facts are much different than you're presenting them. Let's deal with those. And I'm reminded of two things real quick. One is recently, was it RFK Jr. that was having a conversation, was testifying before Bernie Sanders?
Yes.
Where he's talked about him taking money from pharmaceutical companies. I was like, no, I didn't take any money from pharmaceutical companies. Those were all small donations from individual people. Smash cut $1.2 million from pharmaceutical executives to Bernie Sanders. And I think part of this is they're just used to being able to memory hole everything. Hey, we are the mainstream media. We can just memory hold this. You won't remember. And if you do reference back to it, you have to look really hard. It's arcane. Nobody believes you. Right. And that seems to be deteriorating in front of them. And to your point, do you remember James Brown running from the police, like a multi-state police chase in the late 80s that was televised?
The singer you're talking about?
Yeah, James Brown, the singer. Do you remember that vaguely? Yeah. It was one of, like, I remember the chase happening. It was like they televised it. They were chasing him with helicopters and stuff. But late, he was clearly high off his gourd.
Oh, I was going to say, Saturday Night Live did a bit about this, I think.
The reason they did the bit is later on he went on and did an interview. I don't remember who the interview with, NBC. I don't even know if CNN was that big. And the female host was asking him, why were you running from the police? And his response was, straight face, I wasn't running from the police. They were chasing me.
That might be where I remember it from.
All they had to do was stop chasing me.
Right.
And I wasn't running. They were chasing me. It's like, my man.
There's a certain genius to it. There is. A certain, and I'm with you. There's, this phenomenon, like it's got so many facets to it. I kind of love it because there's, on the one hand, there's a version of it that's childlike in the sense that, I don't know, all 27 listeners here may love, how many have kids, but if you've ever had a kid, a young kid, a toddler particularly, when they're first kind of verbal and 4 or 5, I don't know, somewhere in there, and shit gets broken, as shit is wont to do in the presence of children. When you walk in the room and there's like a smashed vase or whatever it is, a light or a broken glass, and there's a moment of like, this is what I really did. There are some circumstantial evidence is stronger than others, as in when there's a trout in the milk, right? So some circumstantial evidence, such as when there's no one else in the room and one of your mother's yadros is busted into a million pieces all over the floor, and I have just walked in. There's the list of, and we don't have any pets. The list of candidates is, it's you and the ghosts. And notwithstanding that, kids will look at you, plant their feet, look you right in the eyes, as beautiful as those little toddlers are, and they will just lie like they're a drug mule for a Colombian drug lord, like just with much better. Well, it jumped. I'll never forget that. Yes.
Well, my dad used to say that when he had one kid, he had one kid. And when he had 2 kids, he had 4 kids, because I don't know and not me showed up.
That was the old Dennis the Menace, the old family circle. Yeah. They used to have he had the invisible characters in the family circle. For those who remember the comics in the paper, who are old enough like me, the family circle used to have that, and there'd be an invisible kid, and all the kids would be standing around. I don't know, it'd be like,
me, I didn't do it.
Not me. There was a little invisible, not me. Yeah, and so there's a certain. I think that's part of its effect on us, is we have that recollection of lying, and we all have that experience with it. So we're like, oh, okay. But then on the other hand, like these are full-grown adults and these are crimes, and you know what I mean? You're like, what? There's something else going on here. It's not youthful naivete. But I think it is. I think
in the final analysis, most people don't realize that outside of psychopaths, we all lie like 3-year-olds. Like none of us are accomplished liars. That the majority of the time that you're lying, you're not so much getting away with it as people are just not calling you out. Like there's a remarkable
Right. Is
between,
your bullshit is just being ignored.
yes, we are just going to like let this sleeping dog lie and let you feel good about yourself and move along. And then every once in a while, there's some disagreeable truth teller that goes, pulls a Columbo, is like, the details here aren't adding up. Like, how is this connected to that? There seems to be a plot, a hole in your plot here.
And part of this stems from, I don't wonder, like to your point, the whole like the Democrats are an arm of the media rather than the other way around. Is how much of this is now we live at a time when they're still using the same tools. We still have some of the same media, and I think that's a big part of what's happening too. I really do think we are collectively, and it's probably it'll probably continue this way for a little while, but we're in a transition phase with media. Like I've seen some great, really thoughtful pieces, some written pieces on people talking about that we were, in the 1910s, and that was the era through the 20s and into the 30s of radio, all the way. Right. That era lasted of radio. Mm-hmm. Before that, it was, print, and the Gutenberg press got a 300-year run, mm-hmm. of it being fundamentally the media, the right. medium, and then radio, and you wouldn't even say that. Telegraph really didn't have, that wasn't, that all just turned into another form of print, so it wasn't there, but radio was a different medium. And now I'm I guess I'm doing the Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message kind of thing. And then TV came along, and TV was the medium. And we are now, and that got a run of, my mom talked about getting her first television set when she was like, I think she was like 15, mm-hmm. And
I was about that old when I got cable.
Right.
And that was a game changer.
Yeah, but it didn't change the medium, but it's TV. But I think, and then the internet came along and everybody said, oh, the internet's going to change everything. It didn't really change everything. A lot of stuff was different, but I don't think it really manifested quite, and anybody really knew, because the internet's only 30 years old at this point, 95. And really, we didn't get, it wasn't like, I can tell you the original search that we were using, like Westlaw and Lexus in their early versions, were vastly different than what they are now. We had to learn different search, terms that we had to use. It was like slash, all that shit.
Yeah, I was a LexisNexis wizard back in that. That was a real skill set.
Right, all that, so that was in the late 90s even. So,
I remember it was
dial-up until
95. I pulled up the sketch of Timothy McVeigh from the Oklahoma bombing when it happened over the internet. And I remember it coming down like line by line.
Oh, yeah, because it was beep, boop, boop,
yeah.
And then 4,800 baud at a time.
Right.
Oh, really? So the internet really is 20 years old, and television at this point is, let's call it, my mom, it would have been early 60s. So let's call it, television's at about the 60-year mark, and radio, for all intents and purposes, is gone.
Have you listened to a morning show recently? Like, have you been stuck in a car without your phone and had to turn on morning radio?
I haven't listened to morning radio in a long time.
Well, I got stuck recently on a trip without my phone and turned on the local morning radio, and pretty sure you have to have an IQ less than 90 to find that entertaining. Like, it was brutally.
I was just going to say,
it was
the last time I listened to any kind of. The only time I do, there's one radio station here when I'm driving locally, and it's just an old classic rock radio station. It's a great station here in the Casey area. And so I listen to that, and that's if I even have anything on. But to your point, I can't remember the last time I listened to like talk radio and any kind of, like, it all went to, again, satellite. It went to Sirius. It went to, So I say all of that as a setup to this, which is about Tapper and this stupidity that we're witnessing. Is, I think your point's right in many ways. It's that we get information so much faster. things like, I refuse to call it X, what I still call Twitter.
Can't
There,
name it, are you?
yeah, I'm a reactionary. And so people have the ability to get information. And of course, the other thing is, Greg had a great story about this. Some folks we knew some folks who used to collect for people who owed money.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the people who used to be in that field but went legit said that it all changed with this.
Really?
That all went away.
Is it because it went away with Visa? But
yeah, I mean, it was more like it was in the old days, like when we were growing up, right? If you owed somebody money, somebody could show up in a pizza place where they knew you would be, drag you out of there, slap you around, and tell you pay up on Tuesday, or I'm going to come back here and take it out of your ass, kind of thing. And a few people saw it. The guy who worked in the pizza place knew better than to say anything. You know what I mean? But nowadays, so this guy was saying that in the modern age, he goes, everybody's got one of these, and they can snap a picture of your license plate, and none of that existed. And so, in that sense, like in that same way that it affected, people collecting for drug dealers, it's had the same impact on, like, you can't get away with shit the way. It's so hard to be up there telling obvious lies when there's a million different journalists. Now I hate these things for a lot of reasons. We're all carrying tracking devices and all that, but on the other hand, your ability to use them to.
Well, this is one of those things where, my slide away from belief in the police was very long, very slow. And it certainly seems that, like, the police themselves have not realized, like, hey, everybody's recording you all the time.
Well, no, they did.
Their story needs to, like, line up with what you're telling that.
Yes, and that's the other thing. That was the other use of it. It cuts both directions. How many body cams suddenly failed right at the moment of, right at the moment when it's most important to get the footage. I'm not coming down on cops, but they interact. They have thousands and thousands of interactions. But yeah, cameras they cut all kinds of directions. And by the way, to bring this back around to current events and AI, this was the point that I wanted to kind of wrap it all up in. People and AI and the way I see it going. So I don't know if you saw. Did you see? We talked about this last time. Macron with the blow. Macron.
Yeah, I think we just touched on a little bit.
Like, yeah, and they were quick to, like, oh, it's a manipulated video. It's deep fake. It's AI or whatever. And I was like, yeah, that's my take on how AI will not be used for benevolent purposes. You know what I mean? It's, if there's a way to use it to program people, to use it to track people, to use it to tell on people, you know what I mean? It won't be. There will be some people who figure out ways to use it productively, but I predict that it will. The cell phone intercept technology didn't get. We were going to use it against terrorists.
Well, there is. Every technology is adopted first and foremost by porn.
By what? Porn?
Porn. Like when people talk about Betamax was superior to VHS.
Yeah, right.
Betamax lost because porn went with VHS.
Yeah, that's right.
And like, hey, which AI is going to give us the best conjugal visits? And that will be the AI that wins.
Oh my God, that's so funny. I got to look up.
And every step along the way, what gets adopted is what the porn industry decides to adopt.
Damn, I got to go look up that VHS and Betamax, because I don't know if you remember those technologies, and everybody thought that Beta was the superior technology.
Oh, absolutely, it was,
and better quality, which is a better all around.
But
Matt Burns logging in. We had Betamax as a kid. You were lucky, you rich bastard. Matt Burns, way to brag, Matt. We had Betamax as a kid. That's
probably had a Commodore 64 when he was a kid too. His mom and dad loved him.
Yeah, that's right. You had parents who loved you, obviously, Matt. Glad for you. Glad you had parents who loved you.
Yes.
Yeah, and television was better than Atari too, and that didn't play out either.
Yeah.
and I don't know what that was. I think that's some of that's been the subject of the book, but I got to look up the VHS versus Betamax. I got to go do some research because I think you're right that was.
Well, it's one of those things where everybody
Oh
like.
my God! Matt also says my pops had Debbie Downs on Beta. Yes. Hey, your dad's man. My buddy's dad was and this is funny. My buddy's stepdad was a Providence cop, and they had HBO. This is in the late 70s, and they also he had a porn collection under lock and key that, of course, we knew how to. I learned how to pick a lock just to defeat that. And when his parents would go out on the weekends, we would have like the porn watching sessions in my buddy's basement. They were. Mm-hmm. So I'm very familiar with both 1, 2, and 3 of that, Matt. Thank you for that.
Well, this is the bit that I do is that like online porn is what killed tree houses. Because you didn't need a place to hide your legs. Like mom and dad weren't going to climb up into the tree house. The hole was too small. The door wouldn't let them in. Like that's where you had to hide the stuff. Damn. Or people had the neighborhood bush or the neighborhood cave.
That's really good. Yeah, hideaways. Online porn ruined the childhood hideaway. Where else were you going to stash your contraband? Mm-hmm. Man. Yeah, online ruined our ability and our techniques for caching necessary materials. Gen X.
As far as I know, that's an original thought by me.
I was going to say,
I'll be heartbroken if someone else came up with that.
Before. I know you go find a study in 2007 where they talk about this. You'd be like, "Fuck, really?"
Yeah.
Online. I like it. I'm putting these down. You're on fire today, Jake. Jake has had a couple. So anyway,
also that's one of those things where they go, hey, there was this competition between technology. We don't know why this other one won. Like there's no clear reason they should have won. It's porn.
When in doubt.
Rule 34 kicks in. It's about sex.
Yeah. And by the way, this subject relevant to the other thing sort of in current events that just popped up in the last few days. And now, I mean, even my wife was like, you believe this? But Joe Biden, it turns out, has prostate cancer that's metastasized into the bone. And we're told this all just happened, since we were just told recently that he was perfectly fit and he was also sharp, cognitively sharp as a tack. So all of it has fallen like a lead balloon. And it all comes at the same time as I guess the Trump administration is going to release the tapes, the actual interview tapes of Biden when he was interviewed over the classified information that he was found with. We'll just call it that. All the classified information, the stuff, the boxes that were, I kept it where I kept my that thing, and they were splashed all over DC, a couple different locations where he had all this classified info. And he was interviewed, and they kind of had to when that all came out. And Robert Hur, who's a DOJ attorney, Department of Justice attorney, or FBI guy, came out and gave this sort of, this standard, like it was the Jim Comey version of why we shouldn't prosecute Hillary for all her classified information violations. And it was basically, he said that, well, he presents as an old man. Yeah, nobody's going to prosecute this guy. He can't even remember, what he had for breakfast kind of thing. And he didn't really say that, and because at the time Biden was president, so nobody wanted to hear that. Well, anyway, now this is all spilling out.
He was pretty clear that he didn't have the mental acuity to defend himself. Like it was a very clear. I mean, he was politically wording it, so he didn't come out and say this guy's adult. Yeah. But it was clear, this guy doesn't have the mental capacity to be prosecuted. Now you can go back to being president. It's like. Right.
Yeah, it was amazing. So evidently now that Trump's got the keys to the White House, he's like, let's just let the people hear that.
Right.
And I think he's setting up, I think what this is all setting up for, and nothing happens in a vacuum in DC. So this is all setting up for, at the same time this is going on, there was and I know a little inside baseball on this one. Just
by the way, I'm just going to jump in real quick. I asked AI how long it takes Biden's cancer to go from diagnosis to being in the bones. And it says 18 to 36 months.
Yeah. And there have been doctors who have come out and been like, there's no chance that they didn't prior to that, they would have had notice with PSA results and all that shit. You know what I mean? Like, there's no chance that this just popped up.
This is 1.5 to 3 years to get to the stage that he's at now.
By the way, you can find, and it got scrubbed quickly, but you can find a video. There was a Biden gaffe when he was president in 2022, I think it is. So 3 years ago, where he said he had cancer. And then they were quick to, the White House Office Communications was quick to come out and say, he gave a speech where he was like, oh, I got cancer. Whoops. I wasn't supposed to say that. He said one of those. And then they, quickly the White House came out, he's done, no. So it's there. You might be able to put your finger on the moment when he accidentally blurted it out in public. There's a speech where he said that. But anyway, so all of that is running around and on the.
Yeah, so we were talking about the nothing happens in DC in a vacuum. Yeah, now this is coming out.
So
Trump's going to release the tapes.
Yeah, he's going to release the tapes with Robert Hur, and this is all happening right in conjunction with some other things, which is, for those who don't care about attorneys, and you shouldn't, there's a guy named Ed Martin, and he's an attorney, and he was for a while the interim U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia. So an important, and particularly for the swamp creatures, who the U.S. attorney is for D.C. matters. And he has other roles as well. And a guy named Trump appointed as the interim, one of the first things he did as that, won him a lot of votes with Jan 6 defendants, was he appointed Ed Martin as the acting U.S. attorney for DC. And Ed Martin was known for being one of the big defenders. He was one of the attorneys who stepped up to defend January 6th defendants. And so Martin then became the U.S. attorney. Well, recently they were trying to get him confirmed for that position permanently. And he ran into some opposition, specifically from, I think, Tom Tillis. And so Ed Martin could not become the U.S. attorney in D.C. So then Trump appointed him. This has all happened like recently in the last couple of weeks. Martin has now instead been appointed the pardons attorney. And his first tweet was something to the effect of, we're going to look in and find out about whether these, things are legit or not. Or so what this is setting up for, and Trump keeps referring to Biden as President Auto Pen and all of that. And what we are seeing is I think the prepping of the battle space, the information battle space, which becomes the legal battle space for what will be a challenge to all of those pardons. And then they're going to go after the core of people, whoever their political, the people who they think did a lot of bad shit. I happen to agree with. And you can say, they're going after enemies, and you can certainly frame it that way. And they are their enemies. And I mean, given what they did to the old Trumpenführer, no one should be surprised. No one about any of this. And they're not. I mean, like the most searched for term when Trump got elected out of DC, the number one Google search was like criminal defense attorney. So I was seeing that back when. So I think all of this is, I bring this back up, what the hell, what you get from the media is always a limited hang up, is always an op, is always a spin, is always trying to prep for something else that's going on. And to the extent that I just haven't.
Well, they can't just report on the facts anymore. Like here is what happened. They have to give you a very limited view of what happened. And to tie in a couple things that we've talked about, Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, has his own morning show. It has better ratings than CNN. Like the people who turn into him drinking coffee and just talking about whatever he wants to talk about has more viewers than CNN.
Yeah.
He's come out that he has the same cancer that Biden has. Yeah. He expects to be dead by summer.
Yeah, I saw that too. Speaking of current events, I saw that same thing. Like, wow. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That ain't good.
And I think, Scott Adams is one of those things that people have characterized him as pro-Trump. And I think he's less pro-Trump and more, I'm just telling you what's going to happen. Yeah. Like this is the landscape. This is how he's presenting himself. Say what you will about Scott Adams. He's very good at persuasion. He understands it.
Oh, yeah.
And he's just said he's more persuasive because of these things. And people said,
I think his prediction.
It's like,
no, I don't think he. Matt, it's a real interesting question. Are the pardons being invalid? And I'll tell you why. And this is kind of more like down in the weeds legal stuff, but there's the preemptive pardon is a very, very new phenomenon in the history of the Republic. We did not operate this way, which is not to say that we haven't had pardons, and there's a bunch of precedent. I was surprised to learn of. The one that sort of created this interesting pardoning a big class of people, as it was, the pardon had not been understood that way traditionally. It's sort of a function of Anglo-American law. But this preemptive pardon, Lincoln used it to kind of pardon members of the South who had, to get around some of the problems with how are they going to staff the post Civil War government if everyone who is in the South who is in a public position was deemed a traitor because they had been in the Confederacy. And so to get around this, Lincoln created this sort of blanket pardon, but it had very specific conditions, and it wasn't sort of like, but it was the first where it was like, hey, we're going to pardon people from this period of time. And he was trying to block out like, hey, what these guys did as being members of the Confederacy, we're just going to pardon them for that. We're all going to move on with our lives. And they had to do some things. They had to sign a loyalty oath, a few other things they had to do to qualify. But the next time you really got something big like this, Matt, was Ford's pardon of Nixon. And that's this also like, I'm going to pardon you for this string of dates. And at the time, it was believed, it was talked about that this probably would not pass legal muster, that Nixon's pardon by Ford, I guess you call it Ford's pardon of Nixon, would not necessarily withstand scrutiny because it was this sort of, and for anything that you may be prosecuted for kind of thing, this prospective kind of thing for things that happened in the past and all that. But at the time, everybody was just happy that Nixon was going out the door and, we're all going to move past this. And now what you got is this sort of Franken pardon that has now come, these Biden ones. And there's some real questions to be answered about if you can pardon a fucking committee, like what? No.
Well, if a corporation's a real person, why can't a committee be a real person?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because it's obviously intended to protect them for prosecution over a certain thing. But I mean, suppose somebody on the January 6th committee, it turns out, committed a child murder, during their service on the committee. You're going to tell me that pardon covers that? I mean, there's a lot of questions about the validity where there's no.
Were there Podestas on the committee?
Maybe
it's a conspiracy theory since you bring up child murder, but.
Well, yeah, I mean, no, it's a fair question. I mean, people laugh, but no, it's not conspiracy theory. My ass, man. Politicians are bad people, and these things are never done for anything. But
since 2019, we have a perfect batting record.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, right. So I would say there's some real questions about it, Matt. To your question, will these pardons hold up? And all I'm telling you is, I'm sort of making a prediction that there are some disconnected things and all of this stuff with Biden being infirm and whether he was or wasn't, and the release of the her transcripts and what you're going to see, what we're witnessing are what I wish I had that book in front of me. Jake, do you remember that book Story Wars? Do you remember that? It went through the CrossFit community. It was big because somebody gave Greg a copy way back in the day when it first came out, and it was really popular. I think it was one of the who the Beyond the Whiteboard guys.
Yeah,
I don't know if it was Jonathan or Mo. Somebody in that crew, I think, had read that book and was like, "Oh, you got to read this, Coach." And it's a very good book about how the people who tell the best stories are the people who
win.
Who win? That's really what it is. And I mean, not news to you or me or anybody who's read Joseph Campbell or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that that's just how we're wired up. Story is what wins. And so I think what we're witnessing right now in this both in local of current ongoing daily events and in the broader perspective, we are in the transition from old media to new media. We're leaving the age of television. Television's dying. It's still powerful, but television is the Roman Empire of media right now.
Well,
Circa Nero.
It's one of those things where you bring up the Roman Empire that I probably view this differently than most people. That the prosecution of Trump was a crossing the Rubicon moment for government, and it isn't that I'm sure most people view Trump as Caesar, but I don't. I view the government as Caesar. That they crossed a line. They said, "Hey, we're going to prosecute you. We're going to try to put you in jail. We're going to try and do all these things to you," and they took their shot and missed.
Yes.
And if Trump had, or if Caesar had crossed from Gaul over the Rubicon into Italy and had lost, people wouldn't have just shrugged and said, fair dinkum, no harm, no foul. We'll sort it out. They were like, no, he would have been executed. But the only reason it worked is because it worked, and
right.
they took their shot. It didn't work. Bad news for you. That is doom.
Yeah, there's a lot going on all at once. I mean, he's the perfect avatar. A reality TV host who got famous through that medium, and then he was, how Howard Stern used to call himself the king of all media. Remember when Stern took that? He was like, "I'm king of all media," because he'd been, he's actually quite a talented. Like he can manage a radio board. I've heard there are some old he shows off, but he really is an old school radio guy. He can run a board, do his own sounds. I mean, he can do it all. It's impressive, and I hate Howard Stern. But talent's talent, and so the guy can run a radio board. And then when he went over to did that movie and he was successful and blah blah blah, and he proclaimed himself the king of all media. But I'm going to tell you who the king of all media is, and I think it might be Trump.
Yeah,
and
he's certainly the king of messaging.
He was
the man knows how to
the first politician to really embrace Twitter.
Yeah,
and then they quickly took that away from him, and then they tried to make sure he couldn't at all completely. We're not, they did everything they could to make sure the guy didn't have a megaphone. And yeah, to your point, he's great at messaging, and this is what Adams. I would agree with you. Adams isn't a Trump guy at all. In fact, Adams was wrote that silly piece. Hate to pick on the guy; he's about to croak, but about how no one could have known, and that's about the vaccine. And anybody who knew just got lucky. You couldn't know. Because he's a super smart guy. It's just, it's idiocy. Like, no, Scott, there were those of us who knew early and with good reason. You just didn't.
I wouldn't say I ever knew, but there were things that were like, hey, your story doesn't add up.
Yeah. I mean, I knew, but I had 25 years of work in that field. I had already had my cherry popped in anthrax back in '99 and seen, peek through the other side of the curtain. And what I saw had told me and people in Children's Health Defense and Bobby Kennedy's organization. And, a lot of us who had been involved in that was like, there will be an excuse. There will be a pandemic made excuse in the future. And it's just a matter of when, that would come, and it was a potential pot of money in light of the legal setup for pharma, the vaccine injury compensation, all of that. It was no vaccine company was going to resist the opportunity to get on the DoD's joint vaccine acquisition program. And that was in effect in 95, So I had already seen the writing on the wall. We all, a lot of us knew this was coming. So when he says that, I'm like, no, Scott, what you really mean is you were completely ignorant, and based on your ignorance, somebody starting from a position of ignorance, you're claiming couldn't have known, but nobody starting.
Well, that is the problem for most of us in a very complex and complicated society, in that we can't be an expert on everything, and which expert are you going to trust? That pre-COVID, I thought the anti-vax people were a little tilted. Like, hey, you guys are a little off. And today I'm like, wait, how was I wrong?
Hey, don't you see, in light of all of this, the first person I thought of who was like, wow, I feel bad for her, is, do you remember how they treated Jenny McCarthy?
Absolutely. Yeah.
A beautiful funny,
Yes.
talented woman
Mhm.
and anti-vax to the hill, and they portrayed her like a complete fucking lunatic. They made her look like she was daffy, stupid. They were horrible to that woman. And now I'm like, where is she? Right? I want to be like, just even though I want to call her up and be like, hey,
hey, sorry, can we throw a parade for you?
Right. I mean, they treated her horrifically, and it turns out like, meh.
I don't know if you ever saw the tweets that Candace Owens put out about the deaths and incidences of diseases at the time that the vaccines were created.
Of course, I've seen all of that.
And I was like, is this true? I mean, which is one of the questions you always have to ask, especially when you're prone to conspiracy theories as I am, is like, are these facts true? And then you have to go back and find the original source and look for that data. And you're like, it is. That's not,
buddy.
This is not a good look.
Yeah, it's always worse than you know. Yeah. Always worse than you know. That's a good heuristic. It's always worse than you think it is.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think we're in this interesting place where we're in a transition in media where we're going from television to internet to instant communication with people can put stuff up on video and like, yeah, we've so decentralized that the media as gatekeepers of information are almost just fucking irrelevant. They really are. And somebody else has posted El Gato Malo has said this. Anybody who doesn't read The Bad Cat, El Gato Malo, he's got a great, I presume it's a he. I don't know. It's obviously an alias. But he says that we're headed for the internet, and the internet will force us into an era of what he calls the reputation economy. And then what's going to happen is just for the reasons you just said, how you're like, well, I got to look and I got to find out everything now. Is this bullshit? Is this true? And what you do is, since everybody can't be an expert on everything, what we will start doing is rather than relying on government experts, you will start curating, and you'll be able to because information can flow through here and into your computer in these boxes. Mm-hmm. And you've got the ability to connect with other humans. You can, in essence, in many ways, curate your own experts.
Mm-hmm.
And what's going to happen is we now, I've often thought that modern society, every time I take a hot shower, no matter how many times, I don't know why, the hot shower to me is like the greatest accomplishment of Western modern civilization. Like the fact that I can just go walk in. I worked up in the yard yesterday. I was all covered in grass and shit. I've been edging and all that. Shit flies up in your face. And I was cutting tree branches down and shit's dropping all over me, And the fact that I can walk into a shower, flip it on, and just go to the bathroom, oh, okay, and then go. And we've got 2 shower heads, so I can get this walk-in kind of shower thing. I mean, bro, Caligula didn't have it as fucking good as I've got it right now. I mean, to me, we're living better. The average American, and I mean, true, and I'm doing okay, but the average American has access to resources and things that a Mediterranean noble up until the 1800s would have killed for, would have had peasants flogged over.
This is one of those hypothetical questions that I like to give people. Would you rather be a millionaire at 1900 or middle class today?
Oh yeah, I know better, man. I'm like, yeah, I'll take middle class today over millionaire in 1900. Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. Running water, phone.
Yeah, I mean, cars, just
air conditioning. It doesn't matter how much money you had in 1900. You did not have air conditioning.
No, you didn't have a self-propelled. You didn't have a 4,000. I got a truck out there that can do the work of how many oxen.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
I've got a vacuum cleaner that vacuums the house while I'm gone.
Yeah, right. While I'm scratching my ass. Yeah. So in any event, you and I agree on this. So we're living at a time when I think we're headed that direction. In that AI, maybe if you're smart, but you'll be able to cultivate and curate. Everyone will have, and maybe already does, and maybe that's why everything's collapsing the way it is you can find, if you're willing to look and spend a little effort, you can find an expert on almost any subject who can give you like amazing insights for fucking free.
And
you know what I mean? And in fact, it's trying to tell people and nobody's listening.
Right.
Like there's a Greg turns me out of this shit all the time. Like he does stuff like this. If you type in how far is it? I think it's called how far away is it? Just how far away is it? Yeah, there it is. So if you type how far away it is and you go videos, it's the name of a site on Google, and it's this guy doing the guy's like a PhD astrophysicist doing analysis and showing you all these amazing images, and he's giving lectures, and there's like chapter 10, chapter 11,
Right.
Yeah, on how far away is it? And it's this guy's giving you a graduate education in
Astronomy.
basics cosmology. You know what I mean? And like how like colliding galaxies and the formation of the fucking universe, and you can do nothing. Cost you zero to curate that guy on your feed and to have access to that whenever you want.
Right.
I mean, all the Khan Academy, all that shit. So we now the everyman has access to the Library of Alexandria, more or less. And how the fuck is a guy who's a mid-level bureaucrat at NIH going to compete with that? Why? He's got a study with p-values in it. I mean,
well, this is one of those things where I see the number of people that I work with who don't know what their own values and interests are. Is staggering. Like, hey, what is it that excites you? What is it that lights you up in life? And they don't know.
Hey, you want me to tell you why that is? I'm gonna. You know what I'm gonna say.
I've got some opinions, but go ahead.
But you know what I'm gonna say causes that. You know what does that?
The school system.
Yay! Of course. Yeah, I noticed that. That was the thing that broke my heart, because I was a good student.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably evident at this point to most people watching.
I was not.
Right. I was a very good student, but I'll tell you what broke my heart was my friends weren't. And it wasn't because they weren't smart, because we could hang out and they were my best friends. It was that they didn't have interest, and they weren't pleasers in the way that I was. Like, I knew that I saw immediately, like, this is the system, this is the game, and my dad would have beat the shit out of me. And so, like, I'm going to rock and roll. I'm going to kick ass on this, and this is the way out. But a lot of my friends were like, fuck all of this. And in many ways, at a young age. Mm-hmm. And the system treated them as a default, like they were stupid.
I remember being in the third grade. I remember this clearly, that we had vocabulary words that we had to look up in a dictionary. Old school, had to get the dictionary out, had to look them up, had to like write out the definition, because that's how you learned your words back then.
Yeah, I remember that too. God.
And it was taking me too long to do it.
Yeah.
And the reason it was taking me too long is I would see other words that I didn't know, and I'd get fascinated and start reading those. And when the teacher scolded me for taking too much time, I told her what she was doing, and I got scolded even more.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know what we're doing here, but I'm not doing what you're doing here. Yeah. And I no longer wish to participate in your system.
I watched that system, and then having kids go through even good public school systems. The one thing you notice is that it is not very long, and you don't have to go very far down the socioeconomic ladder, let's say, where you can see that the active intent is to teach kids to shut up and just do what you're told and repeat back what you're told to repeat back. And curiosity is the last fucking thing any teacher wants, because that's a distraction, and we got to get through this lesson plan, and I got to drag all the stupid kids. We're only moving as fast as the lowest common denominator. And so would you please just shut the fuck up and quit asking questions? You know what I mean? Like, how can anybody not see that that's the natural out? And what that does is it smashes. That's my humanity. I has a disappoint, which is the public school system destroys curiosity, period. Like, kids naturally out in the wild.
There's two things I often say about school. If you took everything that I learned in high school, the entire sum total of my knowledge that I gained in high school, and said, as soon as you learn this, we will let you out, I would have been gone in 6 months.
Right.
Like I just got to get the F out of here.
Right.
And then the second thing, when people extol the values of like how great the education system is, I'm like, you went to school for 13 years. You probably had 40 to 50 different teachers during that time. How many of them were standouts?
Yeah.
For me, it was 2.
Yeah.
I had 2 good teachers.
I had nice people, but good teachers, like teachers, no.
So someone who actually made an impact on your life.
Yeah. Be hard pressed to
Mr. Stallman in the 8th grade and Mr. Kern in the 10th.
Yeah, you'd find a couple. You know, you find a handful.
I've never had anybody answer more than 5.
Yeah, I probably couldn't come up with 5. Maybe 5. You know, I mean, truly great teachers where I came away like, wow, challenged, and
like made a difference in your life.
Yeah,
because that's what all
teacher. I think of one primarily.
Yeah, I guess I'll add. He was a coach. He was never a teacher, but coach was. But he was also a legend as a coach.
Probably taught typing. They all taught typing. That's what they all did.
Yeah.
All right, so there you go. So we're in this crazy space where the media has to, it's now in the mode of explaining its lies and its prior cover-ups in terms of gotcha journalism. Now we're gonna catch up with the zeitgeist. And so what I think is you've got people who, a whole bunch of people who are devoted to an entire narrative about the prior president, about Biden and about Trump before him, and now the old guy's back in office. And I mean, it's crazy. That's all collapsing. That whole, like, the media, like you said, there are podcasts with more shit. If we stay on long enough, we'll have more than CNN does. I mean, at the rate we're going, we might pass each other. We'll pass CNN on the way down.
What episode is this? How many have we done now?
Yeah. Listen, we will pass
that puts us in the top 20% of podcasts, because like the majority of podcasts never get past 10 episodes.
Right. Yeah, CNN's on its. It exists almost now in the way a lot of legacy media does, coasting on.
It is,
its reputation of what it had, and that can only go for so long. The new generation doesn't give a shit that it is not going to give a shit at all that it's the Wall Street Journal.
Right.
That won't be meaning for the current generation coming up. None of that will matter, and those things will collapse. That's why I never understood, why do they always cite that demographic, the desired demo, the 18 to 29 or whatever it is, 18 to 35. And I always wondered, why do they always cite that demo? Like, who gives a shit what 18 to 35-year-olds think? You know what I mean? You're broke. You can't afford anything yet.
They were operating.
And then I realized why that is.
Well, they were operating from the incorrect assumption that if they could get them to have a taste, get them to have a view when they were that it would maintain that way for their lifetime. Right. And that turned out to be not true at all. It's one of those things where places like the Symphony go, hey, the average viewer of the Symphony is 55. All these people are going to die soon. Right. We need to recruit younger people. And it's like, no, you don't listen to the Symphony until you're 55.
Right. That's it. You got. It's so ding, 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 ding. It's so perfect. People miss that. Right. This whole going after the younger.
Like you're not getting 35-year-olds to become 55-year-olds. Right. You become 50 and go, hey, I'm a man of wealth and leisure. I should dress up and go to the Symphony once a quarter with my wife. Right. And she's more likely to get naked after that. So this Rule 34, it all goes back to.
Yes, exactly.
Well, let's figure this out.
Yeah, but it's so funny to say this. People think, like, you know what it's based on? It's the cigarette smoking model of advertising, which is get them when they're young, and you'll have them for the rest of your life. It's the Coca-Cola.
That's a great point, Joe Camel.
Yeah, get them when they're young, and you'll have them forever. The problem is with media itself, news and all that. It hasn't worked that way, and even cigarettes would have crumbled in the face of the internet. And by that I mean the model was based around a media, and that media is dying. It's just not dead yet. But TV will be nothing more than, Greg said this years ago. He was like, soon.
I would say
the only thing that thing hanging on the wall will be is it's the projection device for whatever you're watching on here that you want to cast onto your TV. And we haven't quite gotten there, but basically we have. All of my apps are available on my TV. I just go on there and go YouTube TV or whatever, my subscription services, and I pull it up and doink, and there we go.
Well, I think broadcasting itself is going to die. Like you bring up cigarettes, like I could see being the like it's all going to be very niche now.
Yes.
Like, hey, this is the cigarette for CrossFitters and Bulgarian weightlifters. These these are the
Right.
cigarettes that
Right.
Bulgarian weightlifters smoke in between sets, and you're not a real honest to God Olympic shoe lifting wearing mofo unless you smoke these kind of cigarettes in between sets.
Yeah. It's
I'm
all going
I'm
to be
going into
curated.
I'm going back into cigarette sales, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It's all curated. We all have the ability to curate now. And so I think there may be something to El Gato Malo that we're heading into the reputation economy. I hope so. That would be a good sign
Yeah,
because it would
and
mean, what it means then is that we all become, which is kind of where I was going with all this, like the medieval or, we're living better than nobles is likewise, I think, and Patreon is the beginning of this. And there's, other models like this,
Substack.
Substack, and there will continue to be subscription models where you'll be able to curate everything you want and get exactly to your tastes and how narrow or how broad or whatever, and it'll all be subscription service, and because there'll be people out there trying to put the signal out,
Mhm.
and except it'll all be there on the net. So, which is why government wants to get so much control over it. I
I'm
think
going
that's what
to
AI is really.
one of the things that I've thought about the Democratic Party for a long time is that what they're proposing, their user interface doesn't match what they really are. That they're
Right.
trying to say, hey, we support this, and that's not really what they support. And
Yeah.
that is, I think it does, again, for people who are more honest like you or I, it takes us a little while to figure that out. And it takes other people even longer to figure that out. But that there's a difference between that reputation and what they deliver. And the shorter that we can make that cycle of you said this, you did that
Yeah.
based off of your actions.
Reconcile.
Right. Let's reconcile this. Like, is this a faux pas or are you just disingenuous?
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I think even little podcasts like us will are part of that reputation economy, and even if it's just holding people to account and talking about it. So, Matt, thank you for coming in. Jake, look at that, man. We busted through an hour like it was cool. JV, I don't know if we got anything else, man, but yeah, that was pretty much all I wanted to cover.